Good morning, Joe. Ahead of July 4th, C-SPAN has released its fourth ranking of past U.S. presidents, and the results are not good for President Trump, former President Trump. In a survey of nearly 150 historians, former President Trump ranked among the worst in history. He beat only one-term President Franklin Pierce, the first president to be impeached, Andrew Johnson, and James Buchanan, probably best known for not stopping southern states from seceding in the lead-up to the Civil War. The top-ranking presidents have been consistent, with Abraham Lincoln topping the list. Former President Barack Obama ranked 10th. Joining us now, one of the organizers of the C-SPAN list, who was also surveyed, professor of history at Rice University, Douglas Brinkley. And also with us, professor of history at Tulane, Walter Isaacson, and professor at Harvard University, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and author of the book On Juneteenth, Annette Gordon-Reed joins us. Doug, I'll start with you in terms of how this all was put together, what the criteria was, everything that brought this list about, so we understand what we're looking at.
Well, at C-SPAN, every 4 years we bring out a poll. We do a wide cast of historians and biographers. We had 143 respond, and then the voting goes down in all these different categories. For example, Donald Trump did abysmally in moral persuasion or administrative skills. He did a little better in public persuasion. And so it's broken down to commander-in-chief, foreign policy, and we get them all together and tabulate them. And this is the list. There's a lot of sustainability here. I mean, we always have Lincoln first, Washington second, FDR third, Theodore Roosevelt fourth. Now, Eisenhower's been playing in the fifth zone where Harry Truman used to be, but Truman's quite high. And of recent presidents, John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama all hold extremely high places. You don't want to be in this poll ranked below William Henry Harrison. He was only president for 1 month. So if you're ranked below him like Donald Trump is, it means you did damage, Mika, while you were in the White House. And it's the bottom basement presidents.
And before we branch out here, talk about Abraham Lincoln and his topping the list.
Well, Lincoln is everybody's favorite president because, it was the crucible of our country, the Civil War. He guided us through it. Some of his speeches have become foundational texts. His inaugural addresses, Gettysburg, Emancipation Proclamation. And no matter who you are, Barack Obama's favorite president is Abraham Lincoln. George W. Bush's favorite's Abraham Lincoln. So there's some unity among historians of the utter greatness of Lincoln. What's more interesting, really, is that in this age of, statues coming down, that you see two slave owners, Washington and Thomas Jefferson, being able to still maintain quite high spots.
So, Annette, what do you make, Professor Gordon-Reed, of these rankings? They've held relatively steady as they've been done, right up at the top anyway. You do have, for the first time, former President Obama moving into the top 10. What's your assessment of that top of that list?
Well, it's not surprising to me that it remains relatively stable. I mean, the things that people did remain the things that they did, and people admire Lincoln for saving the Union and Washington for being pivotal to the creation of the country. It's interesting to see Obama at 10. We have had, hasn't not many years passed since he was president, and a lot of this reflects his great popularity as a president, and I wonder how this will hold up as the years go by. It probably may, but we don't know right now. Historians usually like to have some sort of distance between a presidency to maybe able to make the assessment of it.
Hey, it's Walter Isaacson. Hey, Doug and Annette. One thing that struck me about the list was the fall of Andrew Jackson, more so than any other of the slave-owning presidents. Now, I was wondering, since both of you know quite a bit about Andrew Jackson, whether you can speak to that.
Well, I would say about Andrew Jackson, the Trail of Tears has come to haunt him. People are looking at what it was, a genocide of Native American people and the forced marches There might be some anger at Jackson because it seemed to be the president that Donald Trump gravitated to. He went and visited the Hermitage in Nashville. He hung a portrait of Jackson behind him. So it may be that some scholars are associating this sort of populism in a more vicious or ugly, racist way than they had before. It wasn't that long ago, Walter, when you were writing the book The Wise Men with Evan Thomas, I mean, there were still Jefferson-Jackson Day dinners. They were the kingpins of the Democratic Party. Alas, you see a lot of slippage with Andrew Jackson, but you see an elevation of Ulysses S. Grant, in part because of Ron Chernow's book, but because Grant on the issues of race and equality do a lot better than somebody like Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with Doug on this point. Obviously, the Trail of Tears was a tragedy, and people focus on that. But also, Jacksonian democracy, people have looked closely at that, and they understand that that was the period in which even free blacks lost ground. People who had the franchise, it was taken away from them. So the populism of that moment was a populism that was designed to create a white man's government. So that's the reason I think that his image has faltered in recent years.
Walter, we were having an interesting offset conversation where I was grilling you about history, but I like the rise of Eisenhower bumping Truman, and Joe is not here today to defend Truman and why Truman should still be in the top 5. But what do you attribute this rise in Eisenhower's legacy now versus what it was at the time when he was seen as just boring and not very dynamic, and really has kind of been seeing a rebirth of his reputation?
Well, I think what we want now is somebody who's a bit boring. I mean, we've gone through too much exciting times. In some ways, Eisenhower, who I think was a great president, reminds me a bit of Joe Biden. They say, well, he's inarticulate or he's whatever. Well, no, he had a good moral compass, Eisenhower. The only time he deploys American troops is Little Rock, the 101st Airborne Division, to desegregate the schools. I think that you're seeing not so much a fall of Truman because he's staying way up top, but you're looking at Eisenhower, and here's a small thing about Eisenhower that's important now. I know you're going to be writing about him, is that he was a science president. He created DARPA. He created NASA. He had dinners with what he called My Scientists. And I know that Joe Biden has talked about his own desire to be a science president in the way that Eisenhower was. And, of course, you're writing about how Eisenhower was enlightened about the role of women in the military.
Well, and Eisenhower also was an infrastructure president. Mm-hmm. We have our highways, so hopefully President Biden will update that a little bit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious who, Doug, you think you see rising up on this list, and any changes or trends that are happening, especially in light of the past 4 years.
Well, in the light of the past 4 years, Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton have both slipped in the polls. And I think it's because their names have become synonymous with impeachment. I mean, our country went through 2 impeachments with Donald Trump, and there's a lot of comparison going on with Watergate or with the Clinton affairs of the 1990s. So they're not a rising stars at this moment. George W. Bush has gone surprisingly up more. It's still middle to low, but he's gone up quite a few notches, and I think it's a testimony to how well he's conducted his ex-presidency. He's down in Dallas. He has been doing those incredible paintings of immigrants and wounded warriors and the like. He's kept a low profile, but he's beloved in the state of Texas. He criticizes Trump from time to time, and so he's an example of somebody who's somehow been able to become at least people are seeing virtues in him. Everything on this particular poll is about Donald Trump, in my view. Trump is so low. It was such a disruptive force. I think it only makes the other more recent presidents look better. And I've been getting a lot of people saying, why is Jack Kennedy so high? Well, I think Kennedy deserves to be as high as he is when you think about his handling of Cuban Missile Crisis in Berlin, the creating of the Peace Corps, the Army Rangers, the Green Beret. One could go on. The nuclear test ban treaty that Kennedy was able to do. He saved national seashores like Cape Cod and Point Reyes and Padre Island. It is quite a record. And, of course, he was such an inspiring leader. So there's still this feeling of maybe what we could have had if Kennedy would have stayed alive. But Kennedy and Ronald Reagan are holding very firm on these polls. They're looking good.
And Annette, I'm curious if we can imagine the potentials and the different options for Joe Biden as we look ahead and at some point see him on this list in retrospective, given the lows that the Trump presidency hit, according to this list. What are the potentials for him being either a transitional president, for us bouncing back, or bouncing forward, sort of in reaction to the Trump presidency?
Well, I think if President Biden does things, I mean, people want to see concrete accomplishments. And if he's able to do the infrastructure plan and really change people's daily lives in some fashion, I think that he has the potential for being credited as a great president. But it's all going to depend on what actions he takes and whether they can actually come to fruition.
All right, Annette Gordon-Reed and Douglas Brinkley, thank you both. Walter, stay with us.